What's up, guys? Ronin Man here. We've talked about one of the myths right now is that when you replace one sex with another, unicorns and rainbows are the result. And in this case, it's not men replacing women; it's women replacing men. And the belief is by society is that if a man has a job, okay, say he's a manager, he's taken out of his job and a woman's put in his place. There'll be more honesty, there'll be better communication, profits will rise. Some people are predicting 66% for corporations. Lots of unicorns and rainbows, but not lots of proof and not lots of. In fact, all the data we're getting so far is that there isn't any difference if somebody deserves a position, but there's a big difference because of the way society is doing it. What society is doing is saying, hey, it's just patently not fair. So these guys that all earn their jobs need to be taken out of their jobs and women need to be put in. And if that's done, things are going to be good, better. Everything's going to be better. No more sexual harassment. Well, we've gone over Kathy O'Neill, the fake artificial intelligence woman, Susan Maldon, Equifax allowed 150 million Americans personal data, social security, birthday, mother's maiden name to be leaked because she didn't understand a Windows update. And even worse than that, she bragged about it. She bragged about it in an interview that you can learn to be a security expert on the job. That's what she said. It's a good profession because you can learn on the job. That's like learning to be a pilot on the job. So you just get a job as a pilot, start flying around, you crash once in a while, and you can learn on the job, right? Don't you want that? Don't you want that, guys? Don't you want experts taken out of their positions and people learning on the job with things like your health, your money, your security? Don't you want that? Isn't that what everybody wants? Anybody with half a brain does not want that. So, and again, I'm not bagging on women. I'm just saying that when you take an experienced, person who's qualified for a position and you take them out, or even when you hire somebody who's not qualified because they have a vagina or they have a penis or whatever you're doing, you're out of your mind. It's not a good idea. And I always say this example is another example that is not good is a president who hires his son who's unqualified or his daughter. That's nepotism. That's a similar thing. And you saw that with, British kings in history. You had the most lamest kings because his son would automatically get it, right? This is the same kind of thing. Like women just automatically get positions of power now. Like no matter what, if they don't deserve it, doesn't matter. They're in and the men are out. And I do want to say, I would say the same thing if it was all women in power and men getting in. Nobody should get a free ride because it plays to your human nature. Your human nature doesn't want to work. Evolution is what made us what we are today. We had to survive, right? And that causes you. Necessity is the father of invention. You need to need something before you go do it. You get out of college and you don't have money to pay the rent, you get a job, right? You can't get to work, you fix your car, right? You do the things you need to do, right? And so, okay, let's go a couple more. We did the last couple of days. Elizabeth Holmes was basically the next fake Steve Jobs. And she actually was just a girl who wore a turtleneck and she had a fake magic box, like an 11-year-old girl in the sandbox. Her magic box would test blood, and it turns out it was completely fake. And now she is a laughing stock. And I can't believe she's not in jail. Next one, yesterday we talked about Catherine Hoke. She was the founder of a nonprofit that supposedly took people out of prison and made criminals to entrepreneurs. But actually what she did was she sucked a load down her throat because she had a fetish for guys in prison. And so she got paid and raised money off religious people to go blow guys in prison. And now she is laughing stock for the second time because society gave her a second chance. And now she was back after she changed her name and got a new haircut and dyed her hair, which she said in an interview. That was her way of restarting herself, right? And she felt really bad about it. Okay, now we're going to talk about something more serious. Obokata Haruko. Okay, this woman in Japan was heralded as the as a genius, right? Let's look at what she was. The revolutionary work behind the revolutionary behind the work was Haruko Obokata, a 30-year-old postdoctoral researcher who was the first author of both papers. With publication, Obokata, a stylish, self-possessed beauty, uncommonly adept at maneuvering in the mostly male world of Japanese science, was hailed as a maverick. A brilliant new star has emerged in the science world, an editorial in the Asahi Shimbun read. This is a major discovery that could rewrite science textbooks. Quote, as an outsider, young, female, and not an established stem cell biologist, that's pretty important, better remember that part, Obokata, the newspapers argue, was unhindered by conventional notions of what cells can and cannot do. She was a maverick. She didn't care about what cells could do and could not do. She did not care. And it was good. That was great. She was a woman. Yeah. Her fresh perspective, yeah, coupled with dogged work and natural genius, had conspired to create one of the greatest scientific breakthroughs of the 21st century. Can you feel it? I can hear it. I can hear the music. She was just getting, women supposedly have a harder time in Japan getting into research than men. I have never in my life, and I don't think any man in Japan has ever had such a glowing profile written of him. I can tell you right now, this is not Japanese style at all. This is absolutely, and this is the Asahi Shimbun. Asahi Shimbun is a pretty conservative newspaper. I know the editor of the English Asahi. The guy's, I met him because he was gonna write a story on one of my companies, and he was a cool guy actually. But it was like, man, I tell you, that company is conservative, right? For them to write something like this, you can just see that women have a major advantage in science right now. Major. This is men, the patriarchy, my ass. The vaginarchy, man. The vaginarchy has a major advantage right now. And so either way, that was the thing about her. But what happened after this was not so good. So basically she was discredited because her research was basically, her fresh perspective was complete, utter rubbish. Absolute fucking joke. Her idea was that you can take cells, put them in orange juice, citrus, essentially orange juice, and that it would clean the DNA out and they would become stem cells. Now, stem cells, if you don't know, stem cells are a type of cell that can grow into anything. So think of a seed that you could have, that you could throw it in the garden with a bunch of trees and it becomes a tree. Or you could throw it in the garden of a bunch of cucumbers, it becomes a cucumber. Or you could put it on a tree where a branch was broken off and it would grow into a branch. That's the promise of stem cells, and that's why stem cells are such a big deal. Stem cells are hard to get, though. Very hard to get. The way they got stem cells in the beginning was by umbilical cords from freshly born babies. And they would get the stem cells out of there, and also aborted fetuses have stem cells. And so those two ways were not very acceptable, especially the aborted fetus one. So researchers have been working on ways to get stem cells easier and easier. And she came up with the easiest way, the most unconventional way. Take cells, put them in orange juice, and they are now stem cells. And so her research was heralded as a breakthrough. She got hand jobs from Harvard. Everybody was on board with her. The problem was her research was not true. So that was one problem. There was one problem, is that her glory, and so it was short-lived. And after this, her PhD was taken away because they started to look into her background, and it turns out that she had falsified. She had stolen her PhD from the National Institution of Health in the United States. So basically, she was just completely full of it. This woman was fooling everybody. You can see that look on her face. She's just like, I fooled you fuckers. All these hardworking guys around me, I'm the genius. She's the one on the front cover of the magazines. She was trying to get a Nobel Peace Prize because a Japanese researcher had gotten the Nobel Peace Prize before in the past. And what was his name for stem cell research? I can't remember his name. But either way, there was a Japanese guy before this, and this is what she was chasing. Just like the actresses that were sleeping with Harvey Weinstein were chasing an Oscar, she was chasing a Nobel Peace Prize. So she wanted the gold, baby. She wanted the gold. And she got the gold. Unfortunately, she wasn't ready for what came next. And unfortunately, this is a very sad story. So I'm going to take it down a notch here when we get down to the seriousness of this. Okay. So basically, it was not true. And so what eventually, now here's the thing. They gave her so many chances. So her boss, let's see. Oh, I don't have the article right here. Oh, shoot. What is his name? Just 1 second here. This is important. Her boss committed suicide because when this whole thing went down, Sasai-san, his name is Sasai. I can't find his full name here, but her boss believed in her, and they published. It was at the Riken Research Center, and in Kobe, and he published this information, and it turned out not to be true, and it caused so much. It caused 2 research institutes to be closed. Her faking her research. What she did was she took embryonic cells and she just switched them. So they weren't from her research. She just took them from another mouse. The DNA test later proved that they weren't even from the same mouse. So they were from somewhere else. And she took them and relabeled them. It's like if you take peanut butter and you label it as almond butter, right? That was her research, was relabeling things and making a story. You know, her story, it's a very catchy story. That's why a lot of these women have very catchy stories. That's what's interesting. They're very good at making up stories. Her story is that, you know, like people in the field that are experts, they're too close to their work. They can't think, you know what I mean? Like they're too focused on the trees. They can't see the forest. Somebody from the outside can think of something revolutionary and that it could be done simply without harming the cells and creating cancer and things like that. And so orange juice was the perfect thing, and citrus could clean everything, and it was something she understood what orange juice was. She knew about coffee and tea, orange juice, oatmeal, rice, eggs, and things like that. And so then she dropped the stuff in there, and then turns out it wasn't true, and the media went crazy over this and started to obviously hound her for this whole thing, right? And the dog's going mad here, so you guys have to put up with that. But basically what happened was her boss, Yoshiki Sasai, was the deputy director for Riken, was Obokata's supervisor. He was a well-respected stem cell scientist, but this was a huge research center, and obviously he wasn't out there recreating everybody's experiments. He was encouraging his scientists to do their thing and to get their work out there and, you know, make sure that the processes were being followed. And part of the scientific community is a community of trust. You know, it's like nobody's going to fake their research, like absolutely point blank fake, because everybody is smart enough to know that you're going to get caught. Eventually you'll be caught and then you'll be totally discredited, right? And also in Japan, I think there's an extra thing is where you don't want to embarrass your company. You know, there's a very, very strong, this is partly why a lot of things are covered up in Japan, and that whistleblowers are not popular in Japan. The biggest whistleblowers, like Woodridge, was the whistleblower. He was a foreigner. But Japanese do not blow whistles on their company. They cover things up because of shame. Shame is a huge thing in Japan. So a research center like this would never even think that somebody would just point blank relabel things. I mean, it's just so pathetic. It's so obviously going to be caught eventually, especially when you're trying to get the Nobel Peace Prize. Somebody's going to do the research eventually, right? Somebody's going to find out that your research it wasn't even research. It was stealing it was relabeling, and it was absolutely not reproducible. But what happened was when Mr. Sasai killed himself, he left behind a plea. He believed in this. The leader of her boss believed in her so much. So she must have really worked on this guy. And that when he committed suicide, his note said to reproduce the stap cells. He killed himself in a stairwell at work at the research center, at the Riken Research Center. And so everybody took it super seriously, and he was a very respected scientist. So, you know, they let her stay on. So she got a couple more years of work out of this. And she was working on this. She was trying to reproduce her work. Everybody was like, he died. He died for this, right? We got to do this, right? So I'm sure the research pulled out all the stops to get this done. Well, it turns out it was completely fake. It was absolutely fucking fake. And so she was caught, and that was when finally, this woman was stopped. Finally. After the death of her boss, a closing of 2 research centers. Think of how many people lost their jobs, how much money was lost. And also, I read about this myself. This was international news because everybody was talking about this, because this is so uncommon for somebody to just completely fake their research in this manner at this level. Is not common. And so I read about it on Drudge Report or something. I mean, it was big news. So there we go. She now is. Oh yeah. Oh no, the story's not over. That's right. Okay, so the Wall Street Journal. This is like 2 years after the guy commits suicide. Everything. She writes a book, and she gets this glowing article in the book, in the Wall Street Journal, and she's basically presenting her side to it. Now, her side in the book is just unbelievable. This is a woman who's been caught, who people have died, who millions of dollars are lost, and trust in Japanese research. That's what I was going to say before. Trust in Japanese researchers severely went down because they didn't think of this as a woman researcher in a community of men. They thought of this as Japanese researchers are now completely full of shit, because this was completely full of shit level stuff. I mean, this was scumbag lying, absolute schlocky, like no hope type of stuff. Like, you can't pull this stuff off, in other words. It's like saying there's a motor in the car and there's no motor. Eventually, the guy's going to try to start the car, right? He's going to try to drive somewhere. And then he's going to look and there's going to be no motor, right? That's what we're talking about here. It's like, oh, please take the car, sir. Drive to work. Or like, ma'am, whatever. And you get in the car and it's like, thank you very much for the car. Really appreciate it. See you later. And then he turns the key and there's nothing. And eventually he opens the hood. There's no engine, right? It's like, there's no way this could not come to light, right? It's just like, so either way. So now after that, okay, she writes this book defending herself. And she basically blames it on her boss, so she blames it on her boss. Okay, so her PhD was taken away by Waseda University, second best university in Japan. And she said the reason why she plagiarized the whole thing from the National Institute of Health was because she was in a hurry to get her thesis to the bookbinder. And she mistakenly submitted a document that wasn't the final version. I had no idea this would lead to eventually to an irredeemable huge problem. So basically, stealing her thesis, she didn't think that was going to be a problem. And it wasn't. It wasn't a problem. It wasn't a problem until people died, millions of dollars were lost, trust in Japan went down, and everybody wasted several years working on stem cells, going in the wrong direction, right? Then finally, it mattered. Right. So there was a problem, but it took a lot to uncover this woman. And that in itself is a very interesting question. Why did it take so freaking long? Right. And that's it. And so she basically blamed the media. Okay, get this. She blamed the reason why. Okay, her stem cells that she had were not from the mouse that she claimed. So she claimed she got the cells from the mouse, put them in orange juice. The orange juice cleaned out the DNA and they became stem cells. Okay, that was her claim. Okay. So now she's saying the reason why she wasn't able to recreate this, she's been proven the DNA of the cells is not from the animal that she took them from. It's not from that freaking animal, okay? But she doesn't say that. Her book now, 2 years later, after she blames everything on everybody else, she says the media pressured her so much that she couldn't recreate her original study. Okay, it's been proven. And the Wall Street Journal, with a straight face, published this in 2016, 2 years after this whole thing happened. And everybody knows that it wasn't true. And her fake stuff here, that she accidentally submitted her dissertation that was a copy of the National Institute of Health document. I mean, it's so outrageous. It is so outrageous, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. I can understand where she's coming from. She wants a Nobel Peace Prize. She wants to be famous. I understand that. Human nature is like that. Okay, I'm like that. You're like that. Everybody's like that. We all are flawed human beings. But what keeps us in line is society, social pressure, laws, our families. We become good people through hard work and through a lot of help from other people. Our natural state is not being awesome people. We don't like come out of the womb like, oh, I'm going to work my ass off on something that eventually won't work in a research laboratory because I want to tell the truth. And 99% of scientific research ends up getting thrown in the trash because it doesn't work. And that's what I'm going to devote my life to with no known, results. And I'll just tell you a quick story of a friend of mine who is a scientist. He wrote his master's thesis, and it turned out not to be true. His whole theory that he created over 2 years ended up not working. And I was his good friend. We were studying Chinese together, and he said to me, he was so embarrassed. He was like, I can't believe it. His name was Fred. He's the Swedish guy, but he had another name, but his English name was Fred. And he said, I can't believe it. Like, my whole research didn't work, and I turned it to my teacher. And I said, I was like thinking like, oh, you're like at the time, this is like years ago. I was thinking, oh, well, I guess he wasn't that smart, But guess what? He got an A because his teacher looked at the quality of his research. He looked at the work he had put into it. He looked at the theory that he looked into, and he said, this is good science. The fact that this is what he told him when he gave him an A. He said, look, what you did was what scientists do. You told the truth. You told the truth that all the work was for nothing and that you were wrong. And that's fucking science. Science is truth. And it's getting to the truth of it. And it's also the truth of things is that things are hard. A lot of people try to get the gold medal, but there's only one for every sport, right? So the fact that you tried hard and you didn't get it is okay. It's okay. It's not a magic world. There's no magic box, and that's the problem with letting people into these fields who don't have a background in them, is that they actually think that they can do this stuff without hard work. And they also think that if they make a mistake, it's going to be the end of the world, right? It's not. And scientific researchers know that. And that's what science is awesome. It's the reason why we're not living in caves. It's the reason why we have 2-story buildings and 10-story buildings, 100-story buildings, and rockets that go in space and to the moon, and things that are on and on and on. It's science has brought us from the Stone Ages, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a great thing. And I really get frustrated when I see people that don't believe science. It's like the thing is this woman is the type of person that's creating this new conspiracy thing where people don't believe science because they're like, someone like this isn't science. She has a white laboratory coat on. She works in a laboratory, but she's not doing science. She's lying to people, right? She's lying, and she's a scammer. She's the level of a teeth kicked out, homeless, alcoholic guy who steals your wallet. That's the level this woman is. But she's wearing a laboratory coat, getting hand jobs from Harvard. So that's the problem, is that we're not holding people to the same standards. The only way that anybody is going to get into a new field is by hard work and by society holding them to the same standards they held everybody to before. That's the way we move forward. That's the pressure that people need, whether you got a penis or a vagina. That's the pressure you need to reach. Just because you're a man, you're not going to come up with some genius invention. It fucking sucks. It's hard work. It's not fun. You're sitting around in a sweaty laboratory suit, working your ass off on something that 99% won't work. That's the reality of science. And you accept that when you become a scientist, And that's why we really like someone like Galileo and someone like, Einstein. We look at these people with like, whoa, it's because there's a lot of them and there's only a few, like people that really discover something or create something. It's very difficult. And to have a good life, you just have to enjoy the search. You might never do something great in your life, but you tried, and in your mind how difficult it is, right? So it's like, it doesn't really matter what people think of you or people say, because you tried. And that's what it's all about. If you try, there's a chance you'll succeed. Everybody does not get a fucking trophy. There's no hand jobs from everybody. You got to work your butt off. And if you do create something like this, if you do get a Nobel Prize, it's freaking awesome, right? It's beyond incredible. You know what I mean? But I think you have to be happy with yourself just for the fact that you put in the work and tried. You fucking tried. That's what it's about. That's what life is about. You try. You try to raise a kid. The kid gets run over by a car. You tried. You try to get into this certain class, right? You might not, right? You try to write a book that gets successful. It might not be successful, right? You try to do something, right? You try. That's where the beauty is, man. That's where it comes. That's the juice, man. I don't care if you had like a lot of success. That's great. I want to hear about that too. But the fact that you really tried super hard as you could, and you failed, I want to hear about that too, because that's part of the deal. That's what 99% of it is, just giving yourself a pat on the back and saying, you know what? I did my best. 9 out of 10 businesses fail. And when you fail, people around you are going to say you're a failure. But 9 out of 10 fail. So you got to make 9 more businesses in order to be even judged whether success or failure. If you haven't done 10, there's no way someone can judge you as a failure, because that's the statistics out there right now, right? So hold your feet to the fire. Don't be lazy. Be disciplined. Don't expect the world. And let's not put people in positions of power who don't deserve it. And, right here, say a little prayer for Mr. Sasaki, the poor guy who committed suicide and actually believed in his subordinate so much that he put his whole research institute into helping her after he passed away. And that's what her book should be about. Her book should be about that guy, the one guy who believed in her when she was a complete scumbag, and how she feels terrible about that, and how she's going to change her life. That's what her book should be about. All right, Ronin Man signing off. Get to the yoga place. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe and share if you like this. Have a good one.